everybody, and welcome to another edition of Storytime with the Histress with your hosts Jen Dumas and Matt Breen. And today, unfortunately, we are not going to be talking about a really happy story. I think we reached a real high point, Mr. Breen, with King Cholera.
Yeah, for the time being, we're not going to be hitting that level of humor, at least for the next 3 or 4 episodes, unfortunately.
Yeah, this one's going to be a lot darker. Today we're talking about the Belgian Congo, specifically the Belgian Congo in the context of the scramble for Africa. And things are just not going to go well for the African people in any way, shape, or form. And I think saying it's horrific is actually even an understatement.
I agree. I think we're really returning to the levels of violence and human depravity that we saw when we looked at the Mongol expansion out of Central Asia and the level of violence that Genghis Khan wrought on those people who he conquered. We're back at that place.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. Now, the one thing we're going to focus on to start is the Belgian Congo happens, over 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But it really comes back to light around the late 1980s, 1998. What happens in 1998 that refocuses the world's attention on the atrocities committed in the Belgian Congo?
Well, there's a couple things. There's what happens just in the news with the Congo Civil War that takes place through the 80s and 90s and coming to light some of the violence in Central Africa. But really what brings it into focus for the West is the publishing of King Leopold's Ghost, which was written by Adam Hochschild. I hope I said that right.
You did.
Perfect. Feeling good already about where we're going. Which is a really in-depth and thorough exploration of the documentary evidence that exists from the Congo Free State. And that's the first place that we're going to kind of delve into telling this story is there's the Belgian Congo, and that's the colony, the imperial colony that is given to the country of Belgium from King Leopold, who's the king of the country. And from the inception of the Belgian Congo, the Belgian Free State, as it's called, which is going to take place in the 1870s up to the 1890s, we're talking about one man's private territory. Think of his own personal playground. And in this playground, Belgium's King Leopold is going to execute some of the most horrific crimes against humanity that we will see. And that's taking into account what's going to happen later in the 20th century with regards to a Hitler or a Stalin or a Mao or a Pol Pot or fill in the blank with awful man. And so Hochschild does an amazing job, though, actually, in this book. And it's something that few African scholars debate. He takes most of his source work from a Belgian civil servant by the name of Jules Marchal. I believe the pronunciation there is good as well. But really piecing together this labor took Hochschild a long time because King Leopold systematically destroyed the evidence of what he had basically put into place over the 20 years that he controlled the Congo Free State. He literally, as the story is told by Hochschild, burns all the evidence. The furnaces are said to have been working for a week in the basements of his palace, burning all the documentary evidence possible. Now, luckily for us as historians and us as humanity, he only scratched the surface in terms of destroying the records, and there's a huge volume of evidence that was left over, most of it pulled from the Congo itself.
Yeah, and the whole deal, and as if I needed another reason to hate King Leopold, I didn't, but now I have yet another one. Just a little background information for you guys about why King Leopold was in the Belgian Congo to begin with is, as you've realized from our study of imperialism, Africa is one of the last places to be touched by the Europeans, and one of the reasons for this, actually there's numerous, but one of the reasons for this was simply too hard for the Europeans to get in. There was difficult terrain. They didn't have the technology to overcome. They didn't have modern weaponry to be able to deal with any African resistance they saw. And then malaria.
Yeah.
They had no cure up until the 1870s, 1880s for malaria, and malaria is deadly. So the idea that if they went into the interior of Africa, they either were going to make it out, but make it out with a deadly disease, or not make it out at all. It just didn't make it worth the investment to go in. But that changes with good old explorer Stanley and
Henry
King
Morton
Leopold.
Stanley. Ugh.
Yeah,
talk about he's like the Joker. in a lot of ways. This is a guy who's, unfortunately, I think his story before 98 was, this is somebody that we should celebrate. I mean, he graced the cover of National Geographic. He was a hero in England, in the United States, in Germany. This was a guy who was like on top of the heap in terms of like popularity, and he is a villain of unknown brutality.
Yeah, I know when I was in high school, we talked about, he's such a great man for being able to explore the interior Africa, but really he was nothing more than an opportunist.
You know what it is it's excellent branding, because you know what brought him to national fame was he went out and he pulled an English doctor out of the Rift Valley, one Dr. Livingston, and he said to utter the phrase that was very famous in the 19th century and early 20th century, Dr. Livingston, I presume.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's something to be said for the power of mass media.
That's disgusting. Let's get a little bit more into what happens, into why the Congo Free State actually becomes a part of Leopold's holding. Is Belgium at this time is a relatively new country, and it's a really, really small country, and it really has no like poker chip in the game of imperialism in the 1870s. It was insignificant when it came to European power grabs or European power politics. And King Leopold didn't like this, and he wanted to have a bigger stake in the game. And it's not that Europeans didn't know about anything about Africa up until this time. We know that they were involved in the Atlantic slave trade, that the Portuguese, the Spanish, even a little bit of the French had created posts along the western and eastern coasts of Africa. And so they'd had a lot of contact. They just couldn't get into the interior. And I think what it came down to is King Leopold, and rightfully so, believed that there were a lot of valuable natural resources in the interior of Africa, and decided to hire Stanley to be able to explore the region, see how doable it was to get in there, and what kind of natural resources Leopold would have access to if he gained control of that. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. I think the one thing I would add, and just, story time with the history sort of fashion, is that he gets the Congo because he's like, all these European leaders are related, right? There's all this incestuous inbreeding that's taking place inside of Europe, and Leopold's related to the German monarch. He's got relations in Great Britain, and he's kind of viewed as this like younger cousin, little brother mentality, and they just kind of throw him a bone. And so they take this like area of Europe that was unexplorable, like you said, there wasn't the technology.
Europe or Africa?
Oh, Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, no
I
worries.
got so excited.
I know, right?
So they take this area of Africa that's unexplorable, and they're like, "Here you go, little brother. Take this," sort of thing. And as we'll find out, it turns out that what they give him is like this unknown jewel, but as soon as the technology hits, as soon as you get the steam power and the medicine and everything else, people are like, okay, yeah, we gave him something really, really valuable. I'm sure he'll do good with this, though, which was a mistake.
So it's kind of like being given one of those toy cars. Okay, they think they're giving him a toy car, but in reality, they gave him a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Right. Like inside there was like keys to it or something, or like, it's like grandma throwing away the baseball cards, but instead she like gives them to your cousin or something, and he becomes rich.
Oh God, I wish my grandma had done that.
Yeah.
Really. Okay, so Stanley goes in. He covers from the east coast to the west coast of Africa, opens up the headwaters of the Congo River, reports back to King Leopold that there are some really, really good things here. And then Leopold just creates his own army, the Force Publique,
right,
and decides just to take the land and see what goes with it. And so what are some of these resources that makes Leopold realize, I've got to start controlling this, this is mine?
Right. So the first one right off the top is ivory. So Leopold is exposed to the vast quantities of both ivory from harvestable elephants, but also just stockpiles of ivory, because as you pointed out, this was an untouched area of Africa. So a lot of the resources, especially the ivory tusks of elephants, had just been sitting there for literally centuries. So Leopold is able to just harvest massive amounts of ivory, bring them out via both steamships on the Congo River and also this railroad that's being constructed. And even if the chiefs like got savvy to like how valuable this resource is, and I think anybody can infer when the Europeans start coming in and are taking out these massive quantities of ivory, this is something really valuable. Stanley had really duped these chiefs into signing over the rights of not just their kingdom, but also the resources therein. So ivory's the very first big one.
Yeah, and I've seen some of those documents where it's just like this generic letterhead that says, we the chiefs of so and so willingly sign over this land and resources to this country, and we promise not to throw a big fat fit or rebel against them. And because obviously these chiefs don't speak in English, they don't write in English because they're not
writing.
European, they're African. They sign this, and according to Europeans, that's a legally binding agreement.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of very similar to what the British did in India in terms of finding a legal framework for taking over. And these chiefs just are sitting there watching this happen, and this is where the nefarious technology piece sort of comes in, but also some of the brutality of Stanley. So not only does Stanley trick these chiefs into signing over their resources and their land, but it's also said that as Stanley would like cruise around on these river boats, he would take pot shots at like kids playing on the banks. He would like kill people. It was said that his first journey into the Congo River basin, he went in with something like 900 of his own men, and 300 of them didn't come back, and Stanley didn't even bat an eye. So these are the guys that are in his employ. He doesn't put a lot of value on human life.
Well, yeah, totally, absolutely, 100% true. And the ivory is really valuable to King Leopold, but he finds something else. And even though initially it's not that valuable, it becomes almost essential to most industrial processes, and that is rubber.
Rubber.
Yeah. And so the Congo is full of these rubber vines, and you guys, for rubber, I mean, you make tires out of them. It's elastic. I mean, there's so many uses for industrial production that it becomes an almost invaluable resource found in the Congo. And so once Leopold finds this out, the value of rubber, then we take it to the next level, because with Leopold, with most imperialists, they either want the resources for natural, or they want the colonies for natural resources or markets, or a combination of both. And I think to Leopold, it was pretty clear early on that the Africans had no desire or use for any of these European goods that would serve them no purpose where they lived. And so if you can't use them as a market, then you're going to use them as a natural resource.
Right. He's not looking to build anything up. We'll see that some of the other European powers in Africa will build up a meaningful infrastructure. They'll build up market bases. Think places like Egypt that we've already been exposed to, or what the French will try to do in West Africa. Leopold's not looking at it like that. The infrastructure that he's going to put in place is only infrastructure needed for extraction. That's it. He's not going to set up cities. He's not going to set up like way stations. It's just get things out.
And I think, for me at least personally, I think that makes the imperialism even worse. Do not get me wrong. Imperialism in general is just horrible. But at least you see a little bit in Egypt and a little bit in India. You see at least the benefits of imperialism, or the infrastructure benefiting the native people.
Yeah.
You have none of that in Africa.
No.
It is complete exploitation.
Right. It kind of circles us back again to that Mongol conversation we had with creative destruction. And you hear students talk about this in the classroom, and I think any like historian worth their salt will try to look for some sort of positive in the relationship between conquered and conqueror. Not in this case. There's no value add from Leopold. Again, he's treating this like a personal playground. This is a way for him to reach personal aggrandizement, because at the same time that we're seeing massive amounts of rubber and ivory leaving the Congo, Leopold's engaged in this massive public works program, but it's not like building roads and sewers that are going to get rid of cholera and create an infrastructure inside of Belgium. He's building like an imperial gate and a palace and a personal like set of like summer and winter and fall and spring homes, and he's pumping this money back into his wallet, his coffers. Yeah,
this was not, and to make no bones about it, not only did this not really benefit, obviously did not benefit Africa in any way, this didn't really benefit Belgium in any way either, at least until he loses control, but that's a later story.
And so, but here's the thing. There's an acknowledgement from the Europeans, from Belgium, from Leopold himself, that what's going on is wrong. Like, they know that, and we know that they know that this is wrong, because at the same time that Leopold's like endeavoring to extract all of these resources in a public like PR blitz, he's telling the people of the world that what he's doing inside of the Belgian Congo is obliterating the Arab slave trade, right? So slavery has been outlawed globally. The British have banished slavery. The Americans have banished slavery. By this time, there's no more African slave trade like we've seen in the past. But there's still this belief that there's this Arab slave trade. And so we start to see this kind of like quasi Eurocentric sort of thinking taking place. And the Belgians now are going to be at the forefront, according to Leopold, of destroying this slave trade. And this gives him the sort of cover to start creating the force publique that you talked about earlier.
So let's get into this a little bit more. So now we're at the point where King Leopold has the Belgian Congo through the Berlin Conference. He has given it completely.
Yep,
like nobody's going to debate it. Nobody's going to fight over it. So it is his to do with as he pleases. We know it's full of ivory. We know it's full of rubber. And we know he's saying that he's doing this to benefit the African people. But nothing could be further from the truth. So tell us what happens in the Belgian Congo.
So the best way to intro this is Joseph Conrad writes this great book called The Heart of Darkness, which is about the interior of the Belgian Congo and really sort of sets the stage for us to understand what's going on, like the deepest, darkest, most hellscape possible that humanity can create. And again, the chief motivation for this is going to be rubber. And we can't underplay how important this resource became for the world because of industrialization, but then other events start to take place at the end of the 19th century, specifically the discovery of large rubber deposits in Brazil. And now that's going to upset the rubber market, and the value that the rubber has from coming out of the Congo is going to be less. So Leopold's on the clock. He needs to get out as much rubber as he can. He needs to splash the market so he can maximize his profits. So what he starts to do is using the force publique, which is mainly these like psychopathic European guys. The book Heart of Darkness has this guy called Kurtz, and if you've ever seen Apocalypse Now, Kurtz is Kurtz. They don't even try to change it. Psychopath, right?
Terrible.
He makes some of the Nazis, unfortunately, look like Boy Scouts. He is horrible. This is where we get the stories of humans used as lampshades, and Kurtz is reported to have a fence in front of his like little village chalet that he creates that has human heads put on the spikes. Psychopath.
And so the force publique, I mean, obviously made up of men very similar to that. So it's a thug force.
It is a thug force, but most of them are actually Africans. And this, again, is where Leopold's kind of twisting things. He's taking it and reversing it. Hey, I'm arming these Africans. I'm empowering them to get rid of the slave trade. The slaves are actually people that the force publique are forcing out of those villages that are under contract, under that treaty system that Stanley set up, and forced to go into the forest to harvest the rubber. So they've either got to cut the rubber trees and slowly collect the sap, or they can cut the vines and quickly collect the sap, but then they kill the plant, which then cuts into the profits, right? So people are given these like quotas of like how much rubber they're supposed to bring back. At first, the most efficient way for a rubber worker to bring the rubber back from the jungle into the village was actually smear it on their body, and then when they got back, they'd peel it off. But it's like peeling wax off your body, but it pulls your skin.
Oh, that's disgusting.
So it's like torturous. But if you don't show up with your rubber quota and you're a repeat offender, then we start to see the whippings take place. This thing called the chicote, which is a hippopotamus hide cut into strips used to whip people, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of horrible imagery that documents these punishments. But then things get worse. If you continue to miss your quotas, or if they were the force publique is trying to motivate the harvesting of rubber, then we start to see the amputation of hands. And this becomes an unfortunate practice in Central Africa for the next 100 years as a way of torturing, of a way of intimidating. In this case, the rubber workers' family, specifically wife and children, would have their hands amputated by machete as a way of sending a message to the workers, because you can't cut off the worker's hand.
Right.
He's not going to meet his quota.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, under the guise of all the Europeans, the Americans, the Western world is celebrating Leopold as this humanitarian who at the same time is using this like very thin veil of cover and just basically apathy from the West, right? Because everybody's getting their rubber, everybody's living a good life, things are good because of people like Leopold, and he's executing, like, again, we're not going to see anything like this until Armenia with the Ottomans or the Nazis in World War II.
And from what everything I've read about it, what is it, 10 million Congolese people are murdered as a result of Leopold's policies.
And that's not even a disputed fact.
Yeah.
Right? Most African scholars will look at that number and say it's not a roughly, it's right around 10 million.
That's just disgusting. Now, and this goes on for years. This is, I mean, he starts this, what, in 1874?
Right. And the like real terror starts to take place in about 1888, 1887. That coincides with Charles Goodyear learning how to vulcanize rubber and rubber becoming this really valuable resource. And like we talked about, Brazilian rubber starting to make its way into the market. By the 1890s, the pressure is on for Leopold to give up his colony. Right, he's going to have to start to account for some of the bad things that are happening, because people like Joseph Conrad, who go down into the interior and witness what's happened here and then write about it. Like, The Heart of Darkness was one of the best-selling books of both the 19th and 20th centuries.
Yeah, if you haven't read it, certainly give it a read. But
it's a quick read.
But it's an intense book. So this does come to light, and not just Joseph Conrad. There's actually another guy that we know, and his name is Edmund Morel, and he's just actually a shipping clerk or something. Like,
yeah,
I think the resources have to go through England to get into Belgium.
So think about just the shipping of the resources out of Africa on these steamships. They go into different ports of entry, and then just like any other good from time immemorial, when you pull up to port and you start unloading the boat, you have to have a manifest. This is what's on my ship. And once some of the early reports about rubber coming out of the Congo were starting to be made, people like Morel start to look at the shipping manifests, and they're starting to say, like, wow, there's way more like rubber coming out than there should be. And he starts making these other discoveries about military technology.
Right. Doesn't he see, like, for the amount of exports that are coming into exports from Africa coming into Europe with the ivory and the rubber and everything else, doesn't he say something like the only thing he sees going back to the Congo are bullets?
Bullets, yeah. And so this is for all you math nerds out there, here's math saving the world. Like, the dude just crunches the numbers and starts to realize, like, the volume of rubber coming out each time these ships come back versus the amount of bullets and like military material going down, and the fact that there's not like finished goods, which you would expect in any sort of like market-based economy, he starts to think like something really nefarious is going on, and he becomes the first whistleblower. And I'll let you he has a great phrase that he uses to describe these different groups of the Force Publique and Leopold and just the system that's
what does he call them? Do you know?
Do you want to do it?
No, go for it.
All right, it's the Secret Society of Murderers.
Yeah, he does, and he works really hard. He quits his job as a shipping agent in 1901, makes his first publication in 1904, but by 1908 his publications are so damning against King Leopold that Leopold has no choice but to basically give his colony away.
Yeah,
the world just will not let him have this anymore. But here's what's so disgusting about this is he especially from Britain and England, or excuse me, Britain and the United States, because they're the big powerhouses at the time, he actually does turn over ownership of the Congo to the Belgian government. But like, seriously, he gets this huge cash payment in return.
He sells it.
Congratulations, you've killed millions of people. Here's some cash.
And that's where like all this messed up stuff at the beginning. Remember, this was like little brother wants to play at the big boy table sort of mentality from the other Europeans. And then flash forward like 40 some odd years into the future, roughly about 30, 40 years into the future. And all of a sudden this guy he's cracked open this gold mine, like this literal gold mine. And what he has done with the Congo Free State is enrich himself to like Bezos levels.
Wow, yeah, time. I mean, like, it's that big, yeah.
It's really disgusting. And then again, to think about no value add. There is no creative discretion. It's not like you can look at when he sells the Congo at an inflated price, because now he's going to value it out as all the resources that are here and all the things that I've done. When the Belgians like administrative state gets into the Congo and looks, there's this crappily built railroad. Yeah. There's these basic sort of like way stations where like more like hellscapes. Again, if you've seen Apocalypse Now, thinking about the mountain village, the river village that Kurt sets up, this like this horrible like humanless, devoid of anything valuable landscape, this is what Belgium buys at a premium.
Yeah, and students, please don't go out and watch Apocalypse Now without your parents' permission.
No, that's a good plug.
It is a horrific. It's such a powerful film, but it is horrific and it is graphic and it is violent. So we are telling you right now, you cannot watch this without your parents' permission first.
Official story time with the History's plug.
Yeah,
do not
seriously.
go out and watch movies without mom and dad's permission.
So King Leopold actually dies in 1909, and I think one of my favorite quotes or one of my favorite aspects of poetry in all of world history comes from this American poet called named Vachel Lindsay, and he wrote this as an epitaph to Leopold's death, and he says, "Listen to the yell of Leopold's ghost, burning in hell for his hand-maimed host. Hear how the demons chuckle and yell, cutting his hands off down in hell."
Oh,
that is
powerful.
some serious rage and anger towards Leopold.
Yeah, and well deserved.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
One of the things that we saw through the course of our last unit in industrialization and the Enlightenment was sort of Christianity kind of slowly fading out of society and sort of not having that same prominent place. And at the end, I think this poem starts to capture a movement in Western civilization, which was sort of a doubling back on religious value and virtue and the ethical, moral sort of behavior that was such a huge part of European Christianity throughout most of its history. Because had it not been for people like Morel, who was like a devout Christian missionaries, especially American Christian missionaries, African American Christian missionaries, people like Mark Twain, who like put aside his anti-Christian sort of fervor to work with a group of people that he also saw wanting to expose the horrors of the Congo Free State. These are people who eventually will also create the temperance movement and start to work at like getting domestic violence out of society. They are largely responsible for like holding up a candle in the darkness of the Congo and saying this horrible stuff is happening to a group of people that the world seems to have just willingly forgot.
You know, seriously, that's a case of not just saying what would Jesus do, but actually doing what Jesus would do, right?
Absolutely. And I think that oftentimes when we've talked about religion in the past, we've talked about religion as a sacred and religion as a secular, and very few times do we see an intersection between those two ideas about religion. But this is a period of intersectionality, and had it not been for very high-minded Christian scholars, Christian advocates, and just people who just saw something wrong and decided, you know what, regardless of whether or not I'm making money off this, regardless of whether or not my political beliefs coincide, the core values of who I am compel me to say this is wrong.
And I wish we could say that this is the last time in history that a specific group of people are targeted and abused and subject to torture and murder and humiliation. Unfortunately, we are about to enter the 20th century where this actually becomes more common than anyone would actually ever like.
Yeah, this is just the first stop on this horrible journey through man's inhumanity towards man.
Yeah, it's going to be so uplifting with story time in the Historyist in the next couple of weeks, you guys.
Maybe
I know you can hardly wait.
We'll have to dig deep and find something once we get through this King Cholera-esque.
Yeah, I think the next podcast we're going to have to bring a little humor back because this was downright depressing.
I think so. I mean, our next stop in this 3-parter through imperialism, right, is going to be the Boer War, and we'll get into South Africa, and there might be something there.
No, not really. That's another horrible topic.
Well, I know. Oh well. Well,
what are we going to do? Seriously, it's history, people. We don't write it. We just report it.
Just retelling the news.
Well, thanks again for listening to us in Storytime with the Historyist. Again, I am Jen Dumas.
Matt Boreen.
And we will see you next time.
All right.